Everyone, to today's episode of the SEO Lounge with our very own Jason Barnard. Before we get going with Jason, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So Jason is today's guest, and I am here with Andy, who's in Australia right now. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. I'm Andy, a co-founder at IMG and the co-host of the SEO Lounge. And I am very excited about the session that we've got coming up today with Jason.
Awesome. If you're not familiar with IMG, you can join us at Internet Marketing Gold, and we have the world's biggest library of SEO courses. We have SEO tests, and we have a community that's very active, live Ask Me Anythings and or instructor office hours, so you can get help implementing any of what you're learning. And we also have learning journeys, so that if you want to be agency owner that's scaling your agency, or you want to do link building, there are different tracks that you can get on.
That's right. And we're releasing a new course at least once a month, sometimes twice. So there's always fresh training in there for you. And the cost of membership is just $97 per month.
And absolutely,
check it out at internetmarketing.gold. And you can actually demo it for free in the top right-hand corner to see whether it's something that you're interested in.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. So this is the SEO Lounge. It's part of what the IMG team hosts every month. And in February, we are actually hosting Leo Solis of Keyword Cupid. He's very popular for his Python scripts and all of that. So stay tuned, follow us on LinkedIn, or subscribe to our newsletter for more information when that announcement goes live. Okay, so let's start to introduce Jason. So Jason is the seminal master of the brand SERPs. He's an author, a digital marketing consultant, and he founded a digital marketing agency called Calicube, which he runs from France. Most of you here probably know Jason for his SEO work, but he's also a folk punk musician, a songwriter, and an author. So welcome, Jason. Do you want to tell us a few things about yourself?
Yeah, I'd be delighted. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to share everything or some of the things I've learned about brand SERPs. And I think, as you say, I'm known for SEO. I think this is the SEO community I've been involved in for many, many years. And I've now specialized in just what appears when somebody searches your exact match brand name. And that can be a brand, it can be a company, it can be a product, it can be a person, it can be a podcast, it can be a set of courses like IMG. And somebody searching your brand name or your personal name knows who you are, they're interested in doing business with you, or they're already doing business with you, and they are phenomenally important to your industry, to your company and to your bottom line. And I think an awful lot of companies, brands, and people forget to make sure that what they see when they search your brand name or your personal name is positive, accurate, and convincing. And that's what I'm all about. And it sounds like a tiny niche, but it's an astonishing niche because it's a niche in the industry that everybody needs. So it's a niche that isn't a niche, which is delightful.
That's a good way to put it. Jason, we decided to pay tribute to you today by getting in the theme colors of your own personal brand. Tell us, how did this come about that you only wear red?
Right, I don't even like red. It's really depressing. I was in the band, as you said, a folk punk band, and I was playing in blue. Well, sorry, I had a blue t-shirt. I always wore blue t-shirts, and somebody asked me, "Can you wear my super duper red sports top?" And it was a fan. So I wore it for the first half of a gig, and then I threw it to the fan as this kind of fun gesture. And then I watched a video of the concert, and I realized that I looked loads more interesting wearing red in the first half than I did wearing blue in the second half. And that was the day I thought, right, when I'm doing anything on stage or at a conference or presenting myself professionally, red's the color, because you stand out, makes you look more interesting than you really are.
Okay, so you do actually own other colored tops in that you're wearing when you're not on stage.
Yeah, if I go out for a drink with you or for a meal with you and I'm wearing blue, grey or black, it means we're friends and it's not professional.
Good to know. So the red, you lead in this way, you lead with the brand SERPs, with the niche that's not the niche. Did you feel like you had to sacrifice something to specialize, or what's the difference there between other agency owners who are maybe doing SEO in general versus specializing in one specific thing and being the pro there?
Well, it's a great question, because it's so difficult to say no. I mean, personally speaking, I always want to say yes to everybody. I want to help everybody that I can. And when a client comes and says, oh, here's some money, can you help me with my SEO? It's very difficult to say no. I really want to focus on this. And one of the things I've noticed with the Kalicube platform, I've built a platform that automates a lot of what I do for brand SERPs and knowledge panels, simply because a lot of it is repetitive. It's very, very simple. And if I can build a platform that automates this whole thing, I can save everybody else time, and I can save myself the extreme pain, boredom of repeating over and over and over the same things. And I'm going to go through some of those things today. And for most brands, a lot of this will apply. And the idea from my perspective is, the more I specialize, the more I can see what's going to help everybody and where the special cases are. So right now I'm delving down into that, and I hope that in the next kind of year or so, I will really, really have figured this out and be able to truly help people just in this niche that isn't a niche.
Yeah. Wow.
I think you're already helping a lot of people, whether you think so or not, Jason. But I actually wanted to touch on Kalicube, and that's your agency / your product. So can you tell us like what it actually is and how you actually work with clients? Is it a consulting service? Is it an automation? Is it a tool? How do you introduce people to that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, Kalicube Pro is a SaaS platform. The aim is for me to put all my learning and knowledge, or a lot of it, into this machine that then automates, as I said earlier on, the tasks. And what I thought initially was that this is accessible to everybody. And truth be told, it actually isn't, because the concepts behind it are quite complex. So what I now have is Kalicube Pro is an agency tool. So if you're an agency and you want to serve clients, helping them with their knowledge panel, their brand SERP, it's absolutely perfect, because you know what you're doing. And if you're a brand manager or a company owner, something like one of the courses we've done, or the book that I've just released, which is right there behind me, I got the copy today. That's much more for you, because there is a learning curve. And the book is brilliant for people who are coming from a brand management or a company background who don't know much about SEO, because it gives you the approach, it gives you the simple things that you can do. The courses are the next step up, and the platform is the next step up when you get really, really jiggy with this.
Right, so you're actually covering all bases there by having the book, the training, the consulting, and the SaaS platform.
Yeah, I mean, the consulting, I really try to keep it to special cases where there's a real problem, because as I said, a lot of this is repetitive. So it's very much, if you follow what I do and you watch the Daily Brand SERPs, which is a video series we have, or you read the book, or you do the courses, you're going to get most of it. There isn't that much outside the box that really needs to be dealt with.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so if you're actually doing this every day and you're doing SEO every day, then it pays to use your software if it's something you're just doing once for your own brand, then it's probably going to be a little above your level of training and knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you're just doing it for your brand, a lot of it is very simple. We'll see in the presentation in a moment that a lot of it is about your own website, and then it's about your social channels, and it's about the sites you get reviews on. And pretty much that is going to nail it for most businesses who are solidly implanted in their industry, do a great job, and truly serve their clients. Because all Google is trying to do when somebody searches your brand name is represent you fairly, honestly, and in a way that is valuable and helpful to your audience, because it's your audience who are searching your brand name. They're Google's users, but they're your audience. And Google wants to serve your audience the best way it can. And that means representing you fairly.
Yeah. So you mentioned your book. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
And why don't you show us? Bring it up to the camera.
Yeah, I got it. I've never written a book before, so I'm kind of a bit overexcited. This is the proof copy to ensure that it's all right inside. And as you can see, there is a book inside, and it's got images, it's got words.
It's got pictures.
It's got pages. It's delightful. It took 6 months to write, and it really is the introduction to what you can do to make sure. I mean, I call it your Google business card. When people search your name on Google, it's your business card. I give my business card to people all the time, but what do? They put it in the bin and they search my name. Their search on Google is actually more important than the physical card I give. The physical card helps them remember who I am, if I'm forgettable rather. But this is really what's going to nail the relationship with them once they've decided they're thinking about doing business with you. That Google business card is phenomenally important.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I heard that the book has already made the bestseller list on Amazon in the marketing category.
Yeah, we're #1 top new release in the marketing category on Amazon, and I'm terribly pleased because marketing is a very short head category. I mean, there's a lot of competition. There is some astonishing books in there. So I'm really pleased that it's recognized outside the SEO industry. And people from outside the SEO industry who don't know much about SEO see this as a way for them to get up to speed and start understanding. And yet somebody like Marie Haynes, I mean, if you know who she is, she's a bit of a smart SEO person, actually said for SEOs this is useful too, because the approach is new and the approach is incredibly helpful in a world that we're now in, where EAT, expertise, authority, and trust, is incredibly important. You need to convince Google that you're an expert, you're authoritative, and you're trustworthy for SEO in general. And the Brand SERP is the place to start doing that. And it's also the place where you will understand if you've successfully communicated that to Google.
Great. Wow. So before we get going in the presentation, you're in France right now, right?
Yeah, I live in Paris, France. I moved here years and years and years and years ago to play in the punk folk band we were talking about earlier on. I played double bass, and we made very bad money for 10 years, but we lived our lives. I was a professional musician on a very small salary for 10 years and stayed in France after that. I really enjoy living in France. I think it's a really nice culture. And being in a band, I mean, to be honest with you, I think in the UK, I wouldn't have been able to make a living out of it. And in France, I supported Bob Dylan.
Wow.
You can't get that for love nor money. I'm so pleased. Bob Dylan, Captain Sensible, the guitarist from The Damned.
Yeah.
I played a gig with him. Wow, how cool is that? Isn't that the best life in the world? Then I made a cartoon for kids with a blue dog and a yellow koala. And now I do Brand SERPs, which relatively speaking seems quite boring, but it's actually much, much more interesting than one would imagine.
That's amazing. A lot of talents and living the dream.
Yeah. Before we jump into the workshop as well, I got one more question, which I'm really curious about. You are really everywhere. I think we were having a drink at a conference a few months back, and we're having a chat. I did a search in YouTube for, I think it was something really broad. It could have been brand SEO. It could have just been in SEO in general. And in the top 20 videos, your face appeared on like nearly half of them.
Oh dear. I'm really sorry. That wasn't my intention. I think well, actually, that comes from the fact that the idea of brand SERPs is, I think, it's one of these things that's incredibly obvious when somebody says it to you, but most people simply don't think about it. And what I'm trying to do is educate everybody, and it's from SEOs to brand managers to business owners to marketers, that this is phenomenally important and phenomenally powerful. And it gives you great insights, and we'll see that in the AMA at the end. So what I'm trying to do is create content that engages people to come in and start to understand this world that they haven't thought about yet. But when they do, they think, oh, wow, that's obvious. It's so obvious. I should have been doing this for years. So, yeah, I'm trying to get out there. I'm on a mission.
I'm curious, like, how you've gone about creating your own personal brand and creating this kind of this category of one in a way that you really own. I'm guessing that was deliberate. How did that journey start, and how much time do you actually spend out of your day doing promotional and personal branding activities?
Right. Well, it starts with the red shirt, of course, and then it moves on to pure enthusiasm. I absolutely love what I do, and every day I delve in and I find something new. We have a series called the Daily Brand SERP, and it's me analyzing a brand SERP, what appears when somebody searches a brand name, and analyzing something about it, just one aspect, and it takes about a minute or 2 minutes. And what's astonishing about that is I've been doing this for 8 years, 8 years pretty much solid, and still I learn something new every time I look at a brand SERP.
Wow.
New insight, something I didn't think about and go, oh, wow, that's brilliant. So I think it's actually kind of a rabbit hole that just gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So if you said to me, if you had twice as long every day, could you create twice as much helpful and useful content? The answer is yes, I definitely could, because there's so much to see. So it's now just a question of how much time can I spend on this, rather than actually kind of working for a living. And personally speaking, I'd much rather just delve into knowledge panels and brand SERPs and explain stuff to people, because I'm going, ooh, wow, that's amazing. I'm really, really interested.
Okay. So you're actually just motivated to do this more so because you enjoy it rather than just the self-promotion aspect.
Oh, no, 100%. I mean, the blue dog and yellow koala cartoon, it was because I love being a blue dog in a cartoon. And the punk folk musician, it's because I love playing double bass and singing songs and pretending to be a rock star, excuse me. So my entire career has been about pure enthusiasm and just really, really enjoying what I'm doing.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, shall we switch over to the presentation?
Yep, no problem at all. Sorry, I mean, actually, what that does, you could actually say the words naive. Naive is what it's all about. Naive enthusiasm is what drives me every day. I want to understand, and I want to share what I understand. So what I'm about to do now, if I can share my screen, is share what I've learned and try to explain to everybody else why I think this is so important and just how much we can get out of it. Now, I start off by talking about the brand SERP on Google, and at the end we'll have the Ask Me Anything. But importantly, what the idea of the brand SERP is, I can explain who I am, what I do, and who my audience is by what appears when you search my name. So I use my name as a good example. I'm the brand SERP guy, and if you count the number of times that brand SERP appears in this particular SERP, 26. Knowledge panels appear 16. That means that Google understands and will represent that I'm the Brand SERP guy and that I'm interested in brand SERPs and knowledge panels. And that's what you want for your brand. And if you look at it, you say, okay, that looks really positive, accurate, and convincing. And hopefully it can tell my story. So we'll go through it. John Mueller from Google calls me Mr. Knowledge Panel, which is delightful, terribly charming, and makes me blush like a schoolgirl. And this knowledge panel is my pride and joy. I really enjoy trying to build this up because the knowledge panel represents Google's understandings of the facts about me. And it understands the facts about me, as you can see from my own site, jasonbarnard.com. And that is the ultimate aim of every brand, that we are feeding the facts to Google, that Google understands the facts about our brand from our own website. And you can see here that I'm currently living in Paris, Île-de-France, as we say in French. From my LinkedIn profile, we can see that I was a voice actor, a cartoon Blue Dog from the Blue Dog and the Yellow Koala and the Songs, and IMDb on that brand SERP. I was a punk folk musician, the Barking Dogs down there in the right-hand corner from my own site. I've got a groovy podcast, intelligent, interesting, and fun. You can see that from the podcast boxes, and I'm an author with the articles on Search Engine Journal's Search Engine Land, and the book that was just released a week ago. Paperback will be out tomorrow. No, the day after tomorrow, excuse me. And from my brand SERP, you have understood absolutely who I am, what I do, and who my audience is, and that I have a company called Calicube, and we offer a SaaS, a course, and a book. So the idea from the brand SERP guy is that you look at that and you understand who I am, what I do, who my audience is at a glance. And that's what Google wants to do. It wants to represent to your audience who you are, what you do, and what you can offer them. And it makes total sense when you think about it. But before you thought about it, I'm sure it wasn't something that had really struck you, that the idea of when your audience searches your brand name, they want to either navigate to your site or understand more about you. And Google is desperately, desperately keen to show them what it knows. So the plan for today, we've got 3 points of view on your brand SERP. We've got your audience, we've got Google, and we've got you. And your brand SERP should be a big part of your overall digital strategy, whoever you are. If you're a business, you're a podcast, you're a set of courses, you're a person, it's fundamentally important because people will Google your name, your brand name, your company name, your podcast name, your course name before they do business with you at some point in their customer journey. And I'm going to look at how to improve your brand SERP and the basic tactics with the blue links, obviously foundational for everything on Google, but also what I call glorious rich elements, which are things like Twitter boxes, video boxes, knowledge panels, image boxes. People also ask. All of these things will integrate themselves into your brand SERP, and they are what make your brand SERP look sexy. I like the word sexy. It's obviously not totally appropriate, but definitely speaks volumes. So before we start, what do I mean by brand SERP? And I really want to emphasize here, it's not branded search, it's your brand name. So whatever your brand name is, or whatever your personal name is, it's what appears. IMG would be IMG courses. I would be Jason Barnard. Calicube would be Calicube. Calicube Pro would be the SaaS platform. So it's the brand name or the product name. What appears, what does your audience see when they search the exact name, when they're looking for you, just before they convert, or if they're a customer, if they want to come back to your site, navigate to it through Google. And that's your business card. I said that earlier on, and I think it's incredibly important to realize that this is Microsoft on Google, which I always think is delightful to show how Google represents Microsoft, and it represents it pretty fairly, in my opinion. That's Microsoft's business card on Google. And as you can see, they vary greatly. They're more or less unconvincing, they're more or less negative, and they're more or less inaccurate. On the left, we have Microsoft, very rich, very positive, very informative. In the middle, you've got Calicube. We're a small company, and yet we look very convincing. That middle one looks incredibly convincing for a tiny company based in France. And on the right, a fairly typical brand SERP for a company who hasn't thought about this. Very boring, 10 blue links. Who is convinced by 10 blue links in today's search world? And there are 3 reasons they are incredibly important. They're important for your audience. The audience searching your brand name are the A-list of people who matter to your business. So they're clients, the prospects, the investors, the partners, and that is your business card. Once they're searching for your brand name, it means they know who you are and they want to do business with you. All you need to do is convince them. And that Google business card is a big part of tipping the balance for them to come over and do business with you. Or if they're already a client, they stick with you because you look great every time they navigate to your site. And it's important for Google. It's Google's assessment of who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, and how credible you are as a solution for its audience. If you've heard of EAT, expertise, authority, and trust, your brand SERP is actually a great measurement of Google's perception of how expert you are in your field, how authoritative you are, and how trustworthy you are. And it will only recommend you as a solution for its users in the wider SEO world if it believes you are expert, authoritative, and trustworthy in your main topic, whatever that might be. So your brand SERP is a great way to look at how Google perceives you, how much it thinks you are a credible solution for its users when they're searching for anything that you might be able to help them with. And it's obviously important to you because it's a window into your digital ecosystem. What's incredibly interesting here is that Google's presenting to its users, who are your audience when they're searching your brand name, what it thinks is valuable, helpful, and relevant for them. So you can look at that and see what it is that's working and what it is that isn't working in all those efforts you're making in any aspect of your digital strategy, specifically in the content strategy. So for example, if you're investing heavily in videos, but you don't have videos when somebody searches your brand name on that Google SERP, that means you're investing badly and you need to rethink the way that you're investing in video. So I find, and we'll see in the AMA later on, it's an easy way, a very quick way, and a cheap way in that it's free to understand what Google thinks about you, but also what's working, what isn't working within your digital strategy. And that goes for SEO, but it goes for the entire digital strategy that you have. Now, take a look at your brand SERP. Which is it? The one on the left, rich, exciting, convincing for your audience, great business card, or the one on the right, which is boring, negative reviews, definitely not something that's going to convince your clients to stick with you and your prospects to convert to become clients. And this is, for me, the thing that most people miss is that by improving your brand SERP, you are creating a marketing virtuous cycle. Because to improve your brand SERP, you have to improve your digital ecosystem. You have to improve all those references to you. Link building comes into this. You're going to build boatloads of links. You're going to get great mentions. You're going to get great press. You're going to improve your social media presence. And all of that is your digital ecosystem, and all of that feeds into Google. Google understands it. It will help your SEO strategy more generally, and it will be reflected in your brand SERP. So Google's opinion of you, as this happens, it will see that you're engaging with your audience. It will see that you're helpful and valuable to your audience when they're looking for a solution that you can provide, and it will improve its opinion of you, your EAT, your expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, your credibility in Google's eyes. Phenomenally important. And if you talk to somebody like Lily Ray or Marie Haynes, they will tell you how important EAT is. And we work together very closely in the sense that if Google doesn't understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, it won't be able to apply those EAT signals to your SEO results. So you really want to work on making sure that Google understands who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. And that, once again, is reflected through your brand SERP. That's incredibly simple, obvious way to measure its understanding and its appreciation of you, because it reflects that through your brand SERP, and everybody's happy. Google is happy. It understands who you are. It understands that you're a credible solution for its users when they're searching on Google. Your audience are happy because they're seeing a great representation of you. They want to do business with you. They want to stick with you, or they want to tip over from becoming a prospect to becoming a client. And you're happy because you've understood what your audience is seeing. You're understanding what your audience is engaging with, you're understanding what is great and bad about your digital strategy, and you're sure that Google appreciates you and that you can build a solid SEO strategy and indeed a solid wider digital strategy on that. Now, one question a lot of people ask me is the anatomy of a brand SERP. What does a good brand SERP look like? And the answer is incredibly simple. It looks like this. A good brand SERP is positive, accurate, and convincing. And it reflects your brand message. A good brand SERP is a brand SERP where the company itself has control. Because if you have control, you can totally manipulate the results to make sure that they're positive, accurate, and convincing. And I said manipulate, but it's actually just educate Google. It's make sure that Google understands how it should represent you to your audience, and how it should represent you to your audience through Google SERPs is exactly your brand message. If you can control that SERP, you can control that message, you get to communicate with your audience through Google in the words that you choose. And that generally involves 7 blue links. Frederic Deboo from Bing told me a couple of years ago that generally speaking, you will get 10 results on a page. That isn't likely to change much. So you're going to get 7 blue links and you're going to get 3 rich elements. I call them rich elements. A lot of people call them SERP features. The idea for me is it's just something that's rich, that provides more information, more value to your audience when they're searching your brand name. So rich site links, for example, underneath the homepage for me are a rich element, a SERP feature. People also ask video boxes, Twitter boxes, image boxes, featured snippets. All of these things are multimedia elements that Google will tend to put into a brand SERP when it understands and it appreciates the content that you're creating. So if you're creating a lot of content, and you were saying earlier on that I create a lot of content, that content appears in my brand SERP, and that's how I know that it's working. And it's a really simple, easy way for me to evaluate the success of my content strategy. And the knowledge panel, incredibly important, because the knowledge panel represents that Google understands who you are. It understands information about you factually, because if you look at this, on the left-hand side, we have Google's opinion. We have Google's recommendation, let's say. On the right-hand side, it shows facts. It's showing Google My Business. It's showing knowledge panels. It's showing related entities, things it has understood. And that understanding is fundamentally important to Google being able to apply any expertise, authority, and trust signals that it finds, because it needs to understand who you are to be able to understand if you're expert, if you're authoritative, or if you're trustworthy. So I would say the knowledge panel, which for the moment is under 50% of brands have a knowledge panel, is not so much the cherry on the cake, but is in fact something that you really need, as we'll see later on. And
Jason, can I touch on something just from that previous slide that you're on? Now, let's consider that maybe your brand SERP is not showing your brand or your person in the light that you would like it to. Perhaps there's some negative results in there, or some bad publicity. How can implementing these elements, perhaps to take up more of your own real estate that you can control, help to curate and fix those kind of issues?
No, that's a great question. And I would say don't wait until you've got a problem to do this. You want to take control now, because that means that the problem either won't exist, or if it does come up, you will be able to control it much more easily. And the idea of these rich elements, people also ask video boxes, Twitter boxes, and so on and so forth, is that, as you said, they take up a great deal of real estate, and it's real estate that you control. And I can't emphasize enough how important that control is. So if you start to control your brand SERP today before you have any kind of problems, you're going to be much happier, much more relaxed in the future. And the other thing is, if you do have bad results reflecting on your brand SERP, it means Google perceives those to be helpful and valuable and important and relevant to your audience. That's a really bad sign.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So when that happens, start to worry. If you don't want it to happen, start to worry today, sort it out today, get control, make it positive, accurate, and convincing. So KPI for a brand SERP, we've done at Kalicube is measured the brand SERP, the quality, the sentiment, and the control. And we have a scoring system, and this is something you can report to your boss. You can report to your client if you're an agency, to say we have great quality on the left-hand side here. This is actually Kalicube, and this is a real brand SERP from Kalicube, measured by Kalicube, ironically, on the 12th of January, with great control and great quality, because we've been working on it for a long time, and we dedicate resources to this. But we can also track it over time. You can see here, I've actually mocked this up. It goes from qualitatively less impressive to qualitatively more impressive over time. And this is a way we can measure it with the scoring system we have at the top there and the highlighting system that we have at the bottom. I think this is a really helpful way to communicate to your boss, to your client, that things are improving. And what we find is ORM, online reputation management, clients that we have absolutely love this, because it does show that things are getting better and that the brand is looking more and more sexy as time goes by. But we can also measure across geo. And I think that's something we tend to forget, is that in the UK and France and in Canada, in this particular case, things can vary enormously. If you're an international brand, that can be a problem. And it's something I see international brands not paying any attention to, is the boss will look in their office, in their head office, and they will see something good or something bad, and they will think that's the way it looks everywhere in the world. It isn't. Google's brand SERP results vary according to region, because the needs and expectations of the users in that region change, but also the information that's relevant for them changes vastly. The information that's relevant to a Canadian is not relevant necessarily to somebody in the UK. So Google's going to adapt to that, and you need to track that and make sure that you're keeping ahead of the game by making sure that everything is positive. And here in this example, it doesn't look so great in the UK, although it's looking great in Canada. So you asked earlier on how to improve your brand SERP. And I'm going to go through this really quickly because we don't have a great deal of time. But obviously these are all things you can learn in the book. They're things that you can learn from the courses, and they're things you can learn from me by just watching all the content that I create and I push out there. And as you rightly said, there might be too much of it, but I'm going to keep going anyway. But you can watch the replay as well. You can download the slides, and you can learn the learning resources, as I just said. At the end, I'll give you some examples. Now, general tactics for the blue link. First thing to do is make sure that you've optimized everything you control. And that's all your domains, the relevant pages within those domains, the metas, the images, the content. I'll assume you know something about SEO. And if you don't, use IMG, go through the courses, learn some basic SEO, and apply great SEO tactics to every page you can possibly control directly. Now that includes, as you can see here on the left, the about page, the clients page, the contact page. These are pages that traditionally in SEO we forget about, we put to one side. But they're actually pages that will appear as rich site links, as we can see here, that are phenomenally important to brand SERPs. And one thing is the login page for your clients. If you've got a client searching your brand name to navigate to your site, the login page is very important. Don't no index it. And I was talking to Joost de Valk from the Yoast plugin a couple of years ago. And it's something that they used to do, and they no longer do, because they thought, okay, the login page not very important and potentially a security risk. But in fact, they hadn't really thought about the fact that for your existing clients, that login page is phenomenally important in the context of your brand SERP, because it's a great rich site link, because the rich site links allow your audience to navigate to that part of the site directly without having to go through your homepage. Google's looking to provide a great user experience, and that is a great user experience. So optimize every single site you own, every single site you control. Simple
So that
SEO.
those rich site links, they're a really important feature
love
within
them.
SERPs nowadays. You're saying, I think it's definitely no index pages that you want to appear in those. Optimize the pages and the titles. I think Schema is another one for them, and probably sitemap as well. Those sort of the four main things for ensuring that you've got the best chance of getting the right pages appearing in your site links.
Yeah, 100%. And the couple of things I would add to that is, number one, don't forget to write a meta description. It might feel like it's useless because Google doesn't use it in the ranking algorithm, but in this context of brand SERPs, the ranking algorithm doesn't come into play because you're number one anyway. It doesn't actually affect. So what you're trying to do with the meta description is control the message that you're putting into the rich site links. And in this example, because it's on mobile, you don't see the descriptions, but on desktop, you would see the descriptions. And the other additional piece of information is, for example, on the contact page, Google needs a little chunk of content. It doesn't need to be very big, maybe 50 words, that actually just says, why would you want to contact us? How do you contact us? And how will we help you if you do contact us? It needs that context within the page in order for it to show in the rich site links. Right, so onwards. Improve and add the ones that you semi-control. I mean, immediately the social media platforms come to mind: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. They rank incredibly well on brand SERPs because Google understands that your audience is interested in engaging with you, and it gives your audience searching for your name on Google the opportunity to engage with you in the way that they want. So if you search my name, Jason Barnard, you'll see my site, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn. Those are my preferred ways of interacting. Facebook doesn't appear because I don't like Facebook. And Google understands that I don't like Facebook because there isn't much going on my Facebook page. So that idea of saying, I can get the platforms I want to rank because I interact and I engage with my audience is absolutely valid. But also you can look at Wikidata, you can look at Bloomberg, you can look at TechCrunch, you can look at any site that is incredibly authoritative and trusted within your market, because those will tend to rank, because Google will want to show your audience something that's relevant to your brand within your industry in your geo region. So you want to optimize these profiles, databases, and social accounts that you semi-control, where you can actually change the title and description. And then you want to push up the better results from below. Now, I think people forget about this, is on page 2 and 3, there's going to be lots of great content about you. Look at pages 2 and 3 and think, which of these pieces of content do I want on page 1 because they represent my brand better than the content that's currently there? And then work to improve those results to push them up. And it's a little bit like doing SEO for others. But if you take an article about you and you point some links at it, it will rank better. It will push up onto your brand SERP. If you get more reviews on a review platform that you think is great, that will tend to push up too. So somewhere along the line, it's saying, I can improve my brand SERP by improving the SEO of pages I don't necessarily control below and pushing them above the content that I don't want on my brand SERP. So those are the 3 basic techniques for the blue links. And then the cherry on the top, as I said earlier on, is the knowledge panel. I say it's the must-have. Google needs to understand who you are. It needs to understand what you do, what you offer, and it needs to understand who your audience is, because that is what Google is all about today. It's all about finding the best solution to its users' problem, when they search for a solution to a problem or an answer to a question. And if it doesn't understand what you offer, if it doesn't understand who you are, and it doesn't understand that you're the most trusted solution for that audience, it isn't going to push you to the top. That's the secret for the long term for a sustainable business. Now, the glory of rich elements. How many blue links and rich elements? Basically, it's 7 blue links, 3 rich elements. And rich site links, as you said earlier on, incredibly important. They take up a massive amount of real estate. It's controlled real estate. You can push your message out, and you really, really want the rich site links. As I said, 50% of brands don't have them. Or sorry, 40% of brands don't have them. 60% do. 40% of brands, it's a big mess. It's a really big mess, and I can't believe that that number is quite that big. And we discussed that really quickly earlier on, and you made the point: meta title, meta description, content, schema markup, as you said, semantic HTML5, vastly underestimated. And within the schema, you can identify what kind of page it is: homepage, contact page, about page, profile page, pricing, and blog. Those are the pages you really want to push up into those rich site links. Image box is easy to get. Here it's quite interesting because internationally, you'll see that non-Anglophone countries will have more image boxes than Anglophone countries. That is because Anglophone countries tend to have other rich elements in the place. Image boxes are the easiest ones to get. Once Google has found something more interesting like videos, it will replace them with videos. How do you get image boxes onto your brand SERP? It's good image SEO design strategy. So anybody who does decent image SEO strategies will get you these image boxes in maybe 6 weeks. Quality image, SEO them, semantic HTML5, schema markup once again, distribute them on trusted sources. Google doesn't show images on a brand SERP from just one source, your site. You need to distribute them across multiple trusted, authoritative sites within your industry, and Google will show an array. So define which images you want to show, and then make sure those images are repeated around the web. And you'll have noticed that it's the same photo of me absolutely everywhere. There are some variants, but there's one that dominates, and that's partly to dominate the knowledge panel, and partly because I want these image boxes to reflect the photos and the images that I want to reflect, both for me and for my company. And that comes to that consistent brand image. I think that's something that's vastly overlooked. And when you look at your image boxes, you can immediately see when you haven't been consistent. And here with CaliCube, we are consistent. 2 years ago, we weren't. And it took me about 6 weeks to replace an inconsistent brand image through the visual aspect of my brand SERP to make it consistent and representative of what I wanted. Video boxes, absolutely awesome. Decent video strategy. You should get video boxes fairly quickly, fairly easily. We do lots of videos and I love them. I mean, they pop up everywhere, but the great thing about video is it works on multiple repurposed ideas. You can push them out onto social media, you can have them on YouTube, you can have them on your own site, and you can make articles out of them, short clips. I mean, I think this is something that we're all moving towards, and videos are definitely not the problematic aspect of a content strategy they used to be, because they're cheap, they're easy, and if you're a little bit smart, you can make a really great video for very, very little investment. So you want to make quality videos that appeal to your audience, that engage your audience. You want to SEO them. You want to add some semantic HTML5. Once again, underestimated in my opinion. Add captions helps Google to confirm that it's understood the content of your video. Distribute them on trusted sources. Once again, Google will show videos from multiple sources. We see here just YouTube, but it loves Twitter, it loves Facebook, it loves Vimeo, it loves the BBC, it loves CNBC, and it also loves your site. And that's the nice trick, is if you embed a YouTube video on your own site, you can potentially steal the glory from YouTube, simply because on YouTube it doesn't have the context, and on your site it has the context of your brand. So on your brand SERP, getting a video from YouTube into your site with the context of your brand and of your site, you will tend to win those video boxes relatively easily, simply because the videos on your site are within the context of your brand, and that's very attractive to Google.
Is Google going to favor its own and owned and operated properties over third parties in the SERPs?
I think that's an impression we all have. Truth be told, a lot of its properties are simply very well understood because they're so big. One of the things Fabrice Canel from Bing pointed out, he's Mr. Bingbot, he actually builds the crawler for Bing, was saying the more we see something and the more we understand it, the more we trust it. So that structure of the page that you see on YouTube, Bing put YouTube into the Bing results much more than they put any other platform. And it isn't because they're favoring Google. Au contraire. What they're doing is saying, we understand this, so we're confident. And I think that's an aspect of SEO that a lot of people overlooked, is confidence. These machines, if they're confident that they're presenting something relevant and helpful and valuable to the user who is searching for whatever it might be, then they're much more likely to show it. So yes, you see YouTube a lot more, but it is because YouTube dominates, because there is confidence that's built up there. But once again, in the specific case of videos, if you put it on your website and you put Schema Markup, very important for videos, and you can present it in the context of your own brand, you can actually pretty easily grab that control back from YouTube using YouTube hosted videos, which is lovely. Twitter boxes, I love these. I don't understand why there aren't more. It's 11 or 12% in the UK and the USA. It's real-time control over your brand SERP. If you look here, Jason Barnard, when you search my name, 16 seconds for Sean the Sheep to appear on my brand SERP. That's real-time control of my own brand SERP. So I saw somebody the other day who said, oh, terrible, terrible. My Twitter boxes have got this bad message because I made this stupid tweet. And you say, well, just tweet twice more in the next 10 minutes and it will disappear. Real-time control. And the other thing is your audience, when they're searching your brand name, see these Twitter boxes and think that brand is engaging with its audience. Very, very positive signal, not only for Google, but for the users as well. Very simple quality tweets, consistently tweeting every day, 2 or 3 times. Use image, use videos. Don't talk just about yourself. Talk about your topic. Keep it quite broad. Integrate your own brand message into it, but don't overdo it. Don't go on and on and on about yourself. Use videos, or make sure you get audience engagement, peer approval. Thing to remember with Twitter is that it's got a direct fire hose into Google. So Google actually sees all the connections in real time. So it can see when you're getting relevant audience engagement, when your peers truly do approve of you. And once again, consistent brand message. And I think that comes up again and again and again as I talk through this slide deck. A consistent brand message and a consistent visual brand image is incredibly important. And it pays back for your brand, for your business, with your audience across all the platforms. And it's represented once again on your brand SERP.
That's one really important differentiator about, for instance, Twitter, right? If you're really active on LinkedIn, that's not necessarily going to be represented in your brand SERP, whereas on Twitter it is.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's tougher. It will rank. LinkedIn is incredibly powerful and ranks on almost as many brand SERPs as Twitter, but Twitter has the big boxes with the images, so it's much more visual and we recognize it more. The advantage of LinkedIn, ironically, it belongs to Microsoft. LinkedIn is used a great deal in the knowledge graph. So LinkedIn is phenomenally important for any business because it's one of the foundations of understanding that Google has, and Microsoft, of course. And it also helps to give you more control of the brand SERP. If you can get it to rank in the brand SERP, it gives you an extra blue link that you control. So I wouldn't underestimate it or put it to one side, although it is definitely a lot less exciting than Twitter. People also ask, this is something big miss. They're now on, in fact, this is an old slide from last year. It's over 50% of brand SERPs have people also ask in the UK and the USA, less in other countries, not because Google doesn't know what the questions are, but because it doesn't have a quality answer. And here what we see is on brand SERPs, a lot of brands completely miss it. And all you need to do is create a great FAQ section. One question per page, not these big, long accordion systems. Answer the questions about your brand, answer the questions that your users have, because they don't come to your site and search for the answers about your products, your services, and after-sales service. They search on Google. Make sure that Google can put those at the top. And the first place to start is, what questions is Google showing on your brand SERP? Because those are the questions that are most foundational and fundamental to your brand in Google's eyes. And Google's eyes is its vision of how your users, how your audience are interacting with your brand online through Google. And this is one of my clients, and we actually get all of these. Interestingly enough, most brands don't answer any of the people also ask. So search your brand name, search your company name, and ask yourself, how many of these questions do I actually answer? How many of these questions does Google show my answer? How many does it show my competitors, or forums, or Wikipedia, or another third-party source that I don't control? You want to get that control back. So answer questions about, sorry, excuse me.
Oh, I just think that's an amazing tip there, to create your FAQs around the people also asks.
Right, yeah. And start with your brand and build out. I mean, it really isn't complicated. If you're thinking, oh, it's such a vast job for me to undertake, start with the questions that appear on your brand SERP and work out. By clicking on the what is UBG in this case, it will open up more and more questions. And when it stops doing that, click on the actual link that it gives you, go to the next page where you'll get even more questions, and you can build up. I mean, I had a client who did it about 6 months ago, and they found 500 questions. They answered 500 questions, and today they have 1,000 visits a day from their FAQ section, simply by asking the questions about and around their own brand. FAQs are great for short question and answers, relevant blogs for the more involved questions that people might have, where people really want to dig down into the details. And you want to make sure that you've got informational pages about your brand and your offers, because what network does UBG use? That's obviously about UBG, the company, the product. So really make sure you answer all of these questions. Knowledge panels, one of my favorite topics, because they're really, really interesting, because a knowledge panel represents Google's understanding of who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. And Google wants to understand, and you need to educate it. It's like a child. And like a child, you need to educate it little by little, drip by drip. You need to make it trust what you're saying. And here we've got SE ranking, and we've got information about SE ranking that Google is presenting as fact. And I think we often forget, a lot of us use Google. We trust Google. So what Google is saying about our brand in this right-hand side in the knowledge panel, we generally expect to be fact. And you really want to control that fact as much as you possibly can. So build a knowledge panel because it looks impressive to your audience. Build a knowledge panel because it shows Google understands who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. And make sure that the information in that knowledge panel is information that you are providing from your own site. And to do that, you give your entity a home on your site. There are articles online that you can look at for this. So search for entity home in SEO, and that will get you basically to the answer to this and exactly how to do it. You place corroborative information on independent third-party sites that are relevant, authoritative, and trusted. You signpost that corroboration from the home with Schema markup. So you say, this is where the entity lives. Google sees where it lives. It sees the information that you're presenting about your brand, your company, the factual information. Then you point it outwards to all the corroboration online that proves that what you're saying is correct. And much like a child, the Google will understand what you've said, and then will be confident in what you said by checking the corroborative sources. And once again, confidence comes back into play. It needs to understand, and it needs to be confident that that understanding is correct. Long story, that is at least 2 days of discussion if I were to talk about it without stopping. But
is that usually org schema that you're using?
Yeah, I would, for a company, use organization. The thing about it is the more specific you get, the more likely you are to confuse the machine. So if the machine has understood that you're, for example, an educational establishment, then you can go with schema markup that says educational establishment. But if you think Google's a little bit confused, go for the top level, which is organization, because then it can make its own mind up. So yeah, using organization is the safe option. If you can be more specific, but try not to confuse the child. If you think about when you educate your own children, look at Google like a child and think, how would I gently educate this child to understand what it is that I have to communicate, the facts about me? And that means I need to explain
Start
it.
broad, go specific.
Yeah. Well, if you're too specific and it doesn't understand, there's no point. So you need to be general when it isn't certain that it's understood the specificness of what it is you're saying, if that makes sense. So basically what I've just described is a rounded, balanced content strategy. Man, I don't think anybody would say that anything I've just suggested is anything other than a great content strategy. If you put all that together, and I think that's what we've done at Calicube, you're simply creating great content that appeals to your audience and seeking to get it represented in your brand SERP by Google. We've done that at Calicube and it's proved to be incredibly effective. What's great is that content strategy, as you said earlier on, is working in and of itself outside of Google. It's represented in our brand SERP. And in the coming years, I think we're going to perform better and better in SEO. So a reminder, when you improve your brand SERP, your Google business card, you're more convincing to your audience, you boost Google's opinion of you, EAT, expertise, authority, and trust. You improve your digital ecosystem. And that covers pretty much every step of your acquisition funnel. So for me, tracking, measuring, and improving your brand SERP is a strategic necessity. And if you want to learn more, you've got the book, which I've got here. That's for beginners. You've got the intermediate brand SERP courses. It's available on IMG. And the advanced is the brand SERP SaaS platform. So now you can ask me anything.
Terrific. We might just bring Lauren back.
Wow, that was amazing. Really great. We have one question from Sarah in the community, and she asks if web stories would help build your brand SERP.
That's a great question. Yes, they would. Google loves web stories. The thing about web stories is they tend to be quite short-lived. So if you're going to go down that path, you need to be terribly enthusiastic and maintain the rhythm of production. Because what they will do is they can appear in the brand SERP, but if you don't keep doing it, it's like the Twitter box. If you don't maintain that production, they will disappear and people will forget about them, much like a tweet. So yeah, do it, but make sure you don't undertake something you can't maintain.
Interesting. Yeah. We have another one here from Dennis, and he has a issue where his brand name, when people search it, Google thinks it's a misspelling. Do you have any tips for things Dennis might be able to do?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that is volume of search is going to be very important. So the more you can get people searching your brand name, the more Google will remove that "did you mean?" If it sees a volume of brand searches, it will say, okay, yes, this actually does have a meaning in of itself. That's basically Google thinking there might be a different interpretation of it. The other thing is making sure that the top result is you, even on the misspelling, if you possibly can, and ensuring the best click-through rate, which is basically presenting your company, your brand in the best possible light as much as you possibly can. So you're looking at volume of searches on both, sorry, on your brand name, excuse me, dominating both and making sure that you're the choice every time people search it.
Yeah. Great. Well, while the other questions are rolling in, should we do a couple live reviews?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've just realized I actually can't see very well. I really, really, really overtalked that whole thing. I went on and on and on. I do apologize to everybody.
Oh, no, it was excellent. Great, jam-packed with information. So thank you.
We're a little loose on the amount of time we allocate to these episodes. If they're interesting, we just keep going. We've
Yeah.
had one that went over 2 hours a couple of months ago.
Right. Okay. I still apologize. Right. Okay. So we got a lot of submissions, and I've pulled a few up. We can start with Social B. I thought that was pretty interesting, simply because here I've searched in Maryland in America, and it's a Romanian company. And when I search their name, it looks like a local business as opposed to an international business. And that's an interesting problem simply from the perspective that Google is showing on the right-hand side the information, factual information that it has and that it's confident in. And so it's showing the Google My Business, not because it thinks it's relevant in terms of the user might actually want to go to this place, which is obviously ridiculous from America to Romania. It's showing it because it's confident. So Social B would need to build up a knowledge graph presence so that Google understands and will show a knowledge panel instead of this Google My Business. It sounds simple. It's a long process because once again, you're educating the child, but definitely starting this is a very good sign. The fact that they've got the rich site links up there. Google's understood the site. It's understood where the About Us page. The About Us page is phenomenally important. If Google understands that this is the page that talks about the brand, then we immediately have a situation where we can start explaining to Google. Now, as a slight criticism here, I would say this is a little bit unclear. That looks beautiful, which is wonderful at the top. Wouldn't change that necessarily, but note from Ovi and Vlad, is that really helpful to Google? Does it really help Google to understand? So maybe they could change this to make it a little bit more informative for Google and for the user potentially. And here's something that I'm terribly intrigued about is we start in June 2016 and work our way forwards in time. That isn't logical. I'm not interested in when they were founded. I'm interested in what they're doing now. I'm searching for them today. So I would reverse that CV and start with the most recent and go to the go downward backwards to the founding of the company. And Google also sees it that way because it will give more importance to this piece of information at the top than it will to this piece of information at the bottom. So Google reads from top to bottom. You need to put the information from top to bottom, most important to least important. And I would argue the most important is what you're doing now and not what you did 5 years ago.
Wow, yeah.
On a side note, Social B, thanks for submitting that. It was that's a really good one, and we use the software. It's really awesome as a tool for managing your social accounts.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not criticizing them in any way, manner, or form. I'm suggesting ways to improve.
Oh, definitely.
Here we have lots of people also ask. They don't answer them. This is a great example of what we were talking about earlier on, and Andy, is they could potentially just answer these questions. Very simple. And there are a lot of them. I mean, as I click on these, we can see there must be like 20 questions there. So immediately we can answer here the questions about the brand, and there we're starting to get into the questions. What questions Google thinks are relevant to the brand? So you want to be answering those questions because Google sees them as relevant. So you're more likely to rank for them when somebody actually does search it like that and be somewhere around here. So it's great for building out your SEO strategy. I saw also another one, which is See the Vision, a company in Melbourne, Australia. So I carefully searched for Melbourne, Australia. And they have a massive problem because it's ambiguous. It's the name of a song. So when you have a brand name that is ambiguous, that could have multiple meanings, the name of a song, yellow door is another example. I see this a lot. Google doesn't know what the user is looking for. So it needs to hedge its bets. So right at the top here, we've got the song, which is obviously very famous, and they're really struggling because they're in second place because of the name. So if you're starting a company or you're thinking of changing the name of your company, I would definitely think about changing it to be something that isn't ambiguous. And one of the reasons we chose Calicube as a company name is because Calicube is not ambiguous.
So they could, for instance, adapt their name for the purpose of the brand SERP to something like a STV web design or something like that, and that would fix the problem.
Exactly, yeah. Or and encouraging people to search for whatever we get down here. In fact, there aren't any, so it would be see the vision meaning, see the vision. We would be looking here for something Google already associates with them, or here, and there actually isn't anything, so it might be marketing. At which point you can start to think about how can I control this pseudo brand SERP, which is see the vision marketing. Because I've encouraged people, I've communicated so much with the marketing, with my brand name, that people will end up searching for it, which means that A, Google understands better, but B, people will tend to come across my brand SERP as I intend and not this song, which looks delightful, but terribly 70s.
All right, let's move on.
Found Corey, who submitted his site, a friend of mine. We've worked together a few times. Holistic SEO, that's fairly ambiguous in the sense that it's an approach to SEO. And yet he dominates it, which is delightful. And he's associated himself here with questions around the topic as opposed to about the brand itself. So what he's managed to do is quite impressive, is ensure that his company name is associated with an approach to SEO, as opposed to being a brand name. And if you actually search for the official name, I'll bet my bottom dollar, there you go, looks very good. And he's got loads of ads because he has digital marketing agency in the title. And that's an interesting point with digital marketing. Here we've got, oh, I actually searched for that earlier on. One of these tabs, I do apologize. There you go. Maryland home buyers. We've got home buyers in the company name. Traditionally in SEO, it was call a cat a cat. So we give the company the name of what it does. And the problem with that is you end up with lots of ads at the top on your brand SERP, and it's very difficult to then dominate with your homepage. So the SEO technique of saying, let's use keywords in our company name no longer applies because it creates vast problems with a brand SERP, or doesn't necessarily apply in the sense that if you're focusing on building up a brand and building up an audience around that brand who are going to be searching a brand name, you definitely want to make sure that you can dominate these results. And with a keyword like this in your brand name, that's always going to be difficult.
Well, that's a really important point. I think a lot of businesses, when they come up with their name, they think that's going to be a good thing. They think it's going to help their branding. I guess in some ways it can. Like, for instance, if you're optimizing your Google My Business to get a keyword in there, but in other ways it's actually detrimental.
Sure. I mean, it's always a balance. I mean, I tend to kind of go a little bit on, I obsess about brand SERP, so I exaggerate, but definitely it's a balance. You have to say, well, what are the wins I'm going to get from putting these keywords into my company name to pull in the clients for the wider SEO strategy? And what are the disadvantages once I've built that brand? Everybody needs to figure out their own strategy. There's short and there's long-term approaches. And obviously, if you need the generic keyword traffic very quickly, then a generic name is always going to be helpful. And you can worry about the brand name further down the line with the techniques that I just suggested, which is adding an extra word and encouraging your audience to search for your brand name with that extra word.
Because it's incredibly difficult and problematic to actually go through the process of changing your brand once it's been in existence for some time, right? It's really something you want to avoid if possible.
Yeah, no, 100%. That is, I think, kind of thinking ahead and thinking, what are the problems going to be further down the line? I think surviving short term is a vast, major problem for a lot of us. So you've got to really bear that in mind, and then think, there are problems that I can deal with further down the line. I mean, I'll take Kalicube as an example. Is the problem with Kalicube is there is no search volume. All the search volume around Kalicube is for my brand. So that gives me immense control, but it does also mean that I have to build an incredible amount of content and I have to reach out, educate people. Whereas if I'd called it Knowledge Panel Marketing Limited, I would definitely have an easier job in the very short term. So for Kalicube, at least, we kind of thought long-term, original, and I can build my own brand message around the name. So I can give meaning to the word Kalicube that if I chose Knowledge Panel Marketing Limited, I can't really give that any individual meaning. It doesn't have any personality. So it's a choice. And I honestly, I think I picked the most difficult.
I guess if you think about big brands out there, especially in the tech space, none of them are using existing words. They're creating their own dialogue around their brand name, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely go for that. I mean, I've just demonstrated with Kalicube, but that's personal choice. And I think, to be honest with you, I'm probably not the best marketer. So I wouldn't listen to me about marketing. I would listen to me about what appears when somebody searches your brand name. So don't listen to me about marketing. Listen to IMG because they're much smarter.
Don't
Insurance
sell
Navy.
short, Jason.
Sorry, excuse me, I interrupted you.
No, please continue.
Insurance Navy. Somebody I've worked with in the past. This looks great. We're in Chicago, Illinois. This is a local office. So they're a company that has multiple offices around the US. And the trick for them is to make sure the correct Google My Business appears in the correct town. So that's local business strategy. But also that their parent, the parent company website gets this top spot with the correct rich site links down here. Ideally, they would have a local page for the Chicago, Illinois agency down here somewhere. Maybe renew your that one here, for example. You could replace it with a local rich site link. So in this circumstance, if I've got a company with multiple locations, I would create an arborescence, a silo with the different locations so that Google could show the local branch in the rich site links, which would give me this and this in order to get the client into my local office incredibly easily.
By a silo, you mean create a location page, and within that location page, list all the individual locations, and they each have their own pages as well.
Yes,
as subfolders.
Exactly. Right. Each location needs its own page. It's important to understand that Google needs a page per entity. So each location would be an entity. It would be a thing in and of itself. And Google needs a page that represents that because it wants to show here a page where when I click on that result, I actually get here in the top above the fold the information that I'm looking for. So if you're looking at a local company or a local outlet, I would want to come on a page that just describes this one outlet, because if I'm in Chicago, I don't want to know about the outlet in New York. It's totally useless information. So you want to be looking for dedicated pages for anything you want to show here. And you want to be looking at dedicated pages that talk about topics where the person would expect to click on it and come across something like that, which is immediately, I know what I need to do. I don't need to scroll through this page to figure out which part of the page I actually need to access to do what I want to do. It's incredibly functional. This whole chunk here is incredibly functional. It isn't rocket science. It's when the user clicks, what do they want to do? Make sure it's incredibly easy for them. We also had Rise Beauty Lab, another local business. What I liked about this one is the great reviews. Not very many reviews, and that's important, is that you don't necessarily need a lot of reviews for something to rank. Google will rank here. It's Facebook. It's their own account. Google will favor your own social media accounts with reviews, in this case, Facebook, because it knows that your users are interacting with you. And obviously the Google reviews on this side are incredibly important too. But you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got Medium. These are all semi-controlled. That's a great job of these different results that this company semi-control or control, that allows them to make sure that this looks great, that this is the right text, that it represents them, their brand to their audience. The only miss is perhaps this, is they could have the rich site links. And if you look at the slides, you'll see some tips and tricks to do that. We looked at that one before. We've looked at Social B. Oh, Magician John Finch. I like this one. He submitted this, and Magician John Finch is, if he communicates on that, that's amazing branding. It gives this incredibly wonderful top result because it's unique. I'm sure there aren't 100,000 John Finch magicians, around. He's got his reviews up here. He's got his videos. That's an amazing brand SERP. But if we look at just John Finch, it's totally different. So Magician John Finch has done a great job on communicating on the fact that he is a magician. And it's a great trick if you have a common name like John Finch, is if you can add a word that disambiguates for your audience and for Google, you're onto a winner. Because if he gets people to search for Magician John Finch, this is what they see. If he just communicates John Finch on his business cards or when he's talking to people, that's what they're going to see. And it's totally different from a business perspective. And this one, I love it because it's BAU. I mean, they submitted this and I don't know what it stands for, but this is incredibly ambiguous. Google just doesn't know what the person is looking for. I'm assuming it might be Bay Atlantic University. So if they communicated on that, this is what you get, and that looks much, much better. So we tend to be lazy, and I'm certainly guilty of that, is I'll just say, oh, BAU to everybody, and I think that's going to work. But then when I say that and they search for it, they can't find me, or they have to dig down, or they really have to understand what they're looking for. But if I say the whole word, the whole thing, I get something like that, which is much, much, much more helpful to my user and beneficial to me. So brilliant, there you go. Those are the ones that I picked from the list that was submitted, and I hope that was helpful.
Amazing. Great examples. I like it. Each one was a little bit different with the areas that they need to improve on and the challenges.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I actually could have gone into more detail, and I can certainly go into more detail if people ask me to, but that's really just looking at the basics of any brand SERP and saying, here are 2 or 3 ideas that I can throw right off the bat. And you can do that with pretty much any brand SERP. In fact, you can do that with any brand SERP. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
No, I think I cut you off, Lauren.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just appreciating it. So this is great. But we do have some questions we can field. A couple interesting ones from Simon, and he's really interested in adding logos to your images and if that might help connect to the business, to the entity, or, you know, what are some ways that you would help with or work on that?
Well, the thing about logos on images is that Google will tend not to show them in Google Images. So you're kind of going to disadvantage yourself with that. So the idea of saying, I'm going to add a logo and I'm going to brand myself to ensure that my audience, or a wider audience even, sees my brand in these images is a great idea, but you're going to probably not totally get excluded, but definitely get excluded. Now, from a perspective of saying, can I help Google's understanding? Almost certainly, yes. So once again, I mean, we were talking about that earlier on, Andrew. It's a balance that you need to find. Everything you do, including adding logos to images, is going to bring disadvantages and advantages, and you need to find the right balance.
I'm going to come back to our man Brainbuster. He asked a question a little while ago in regards to video schema. So it's a three-part question. He's got several videos on his money page, but only one video object in his schema pointing to the main video on the page. So that's the problem, because he wants to show multiple videos, and he's wondering whether maybe he can put schema into, for instance, Vimeo or a video hosting platform to help with that.
Well, I think it's a great question from the perspective of you need to, I mean, once again, like with a child, you need to be decisive. You need to say, this is what I want. And having 3 videos on a page and saying this is the main video is saying, here are some multiple pieces of information that I'm providing my audience, but here's the main one that I want to show. So that's a good move. If you add multiple pieces of schema markup with multiple videos, Google isn't really going to know which is the most important, which is the prominent one that you want to show off to your audience. So I would suggest sticking to 1 video per page, or prioritizing very clearly 1 video on any given page if you're going to have multiple videos on that page. Adding schema to on Vimeo itself, I'm not sure how that would work, so I can't really answer that question.
Okay, and he also just had one more question on where he can get your book.
Ooh, that's a great question. I love that one. You can get the book for download right now on Amazon. We're doing it at $2.99 for the first week, and then as from Wednesday, we're pushing out the print version, and you'll be able to buy a print version, and then the prices go back to normal. And I got this a couple of days ago, and it looks great, and it's all printed correctly, so we can now release the print version. But it's all on Amazon for the moment.
I've already bought my copy, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. Lauren, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. We have another one about here. It's this: people also ask on the FAQ of your site, is it okay to have multiple accordions, or does every FAQ need to have its own page?
Right. I mean, accordions are one of my kind of bugbears from a user perspective and from an SEO perspective, because imagine somebody searching on your site, and they search, and you send them to this page, and they have to scroll through it and look for the question. There's 20 questions, and they have to read every single question to find the one question that they were actually initially searching for. That's a bad user experience. If they're searching on Google, and Google sends them to this page, and they have to do the same thing, that's a bad user experience for Google's users. So Google isn't going to prioritize that kind of page. So I would suggest that 1 question answer per page is by far the best solution, because when somebody searches for a very specific question, for example, does an eSIM work on an iPhone SL? I want to land on a page that says an eSIM does work on an iPhone SL. And if I land on one that says an eSIM works on an iPhone SL, an iPhone works on an iSL XS, an eSIM works on an iPhone, blah, 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 I have to scroll through it all, and I've got a bad user experience once again. And there's a really good example in France. There's a company called Orange, and they have 1 page per variant of each and every cell phone for that exact question. Does the eSIM work on this phone? And every single one ranks number 1. So the idea that these small variants are a problem in terms of duplicate content, which is the argument I often hear, it's not duplicate content if it's not a duplicate intent.
You're talking about creating an FAQ silo? Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
100%. It's an FAQ silo that, and that's really, really important as you think about the topics you're going to be answering, and the topics you're going to be dealing with, and you build the silo so that you can always fit the questions that you're going to get in the future into one of the silos. And you have two fundamental silos. One is questions about my brand, and the other is questions around my brand and the topics about my brand. And you separate them because that's incredibly important, that the user who is searching about the brand itself is a user who is either a client or bottom of funnel, and you want to keep them in that silo. And if they're searching around, they're somebody new, and you want to keep them or pull them into that and start to convince them to buy. Because if you have on the side of your FAQ a floating div that shows them some content, a menu item, for a client or a bottom of funnel, you're going to be talking about what can we do for you using your brand name, and the other is what could we potentially do for you. So the approach is very different. So you want those two silos. You want to make sure that they are expandable, is the word I would say, into all the topics you might want to cover in the future. And somebody's just ordered the book. How delightful.
Yeah, there's a lot of really great positive feedback coming into the chat as well. But that was the last question from the audience for now.
Well, I think kind of what I've enjoyed about the last couple of years talking about brand SERPs is that it's a new approach. And once again, it's something that's very, very obvious when you talk about it. When I talk about it to people, they say, oh, yeah, of course. It's simple. It's helpful. Anybody can get involved. You don't need SEO knowledge. And it makes sense to any business owner because it's just good marketing, good brand messaging, good brand management.
Fantastic. It was an incredible, insightful session on an area of SEO which is quite specialized. And I guess a lot of people are, even if they've been in the business a long time, have only kind of a surface level understanding in. So for that reason, I think it's an incredibly valuable workshop today.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two things I would say, it's the niche that isn't a niche, number one. And the second is it's something that seems so very simple that you think, oh, I'll sort this out in a week if you're a good SEO. But actually, I've been doing this for 8 years and I'm still learning every day. So it's a big rabbit hole that you never stop diving down once you get into it.
Excellent. Great. And your course is also in IMG, correct?
Yeah, it's on IMG. Yeah, no. And we've had lots of people taking it, and it's been really successful from my perspective. Is once again, I'm trying to get people interested in the idea and get people to understand that it's powerful, it's helpful, and it's insightful, and that is phenomenally important for every business, because these people searching your brand name are bottom of funnel and post funnel. They're the most important people to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much. And thank you to all the attendees who came today. Watch your email inbox. We'll send you a timestamped replay along with the slides.
Brilliant.
And the link to the book if you want to purchase that as well.
Absolutely.
No, thank you so much, Lauren and Andrew. That was absolutely delightful. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that the people who gave some feedback were getting some great value from it.
Absolutely.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Jason. In another few weeks' time, we have Leo Solis from Keyword Cupid, another IMG instructor, an incredibly smart guy, also out of New York City, like yourself, Lauren. So sign up on IMG website. You can find the link to the SEO Lounge in the footer of internetmarketing.gold, and you can stay up to date on all the coming events. Lauren, is there anything else?
I think that's a wrap. What a day. This was great. I have a lot to think about and implement.
Right. My favourite part of the whole day is everybody in red. How delightful.
I'm going to put this t-shirt down back to the bottom of my cupboard until the next time we get together.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thanks very much
you.
for joining us, Jason, and everyone who came along today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.